Welcome to GD Gyan. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell button. Welcome to GD Gyan. After a long time, I'm coming back and I got a new t-shirt. Thanks to Shayan for giving this wonderful t-shirt with the GD Gyan. We'll start with the migration strategy and we'll show you some hands-on with the different cloud framework. Just a quick recap before we go into the detailed topic of the cloud migration. I think you all remember the 6 R's. If not, just have a look on that and let's move into the next slides. Rehost, replatform, repurpose, refactor, retire, and retain. As the name suggests, I think you can remember what all these things. Just have a quick look on this thing. Migration checklist, just to quick a recap that we need to build a case, then we need to have a portfolio, which all application you're planning, migration plan, which covers your people, process, technology, of course, your money and budget, operating plan, where you design for your infra, design, operation, your architecture, application point of view, and then actual migration on pen and paper and then the different partner that you can reach. Nowadays the migration you don't do it by your own, rather you have different services, and ideally the kind of age we are living, we don't have to do anything by our own, everything being enabled by some other service provider and track till the closer. Let's look into the real migration situation. Okay, we discussed quite a lot on the different clouds, and mostly we started with the AWS, which is now a pioneer, and then any cloud service provider comes in, Azure, Google, IBM, or Alibaba, anything that comes in. We always compare with the services from the AWS. So if you wanted to learn some database service, so you compare what is the database service we have into AWS. We call it, okay, Google Cloud is the AWS RDS. So that's how the comparison starts for a quick learning. Let's have a quick steps. The first step for any migration, I'll go a bit fast on these tools, techniques, and we'll try to cover some of the hands-on as well. The first thing that we do, the assessment or the discovery, which means your infrastructure, you try to understand which all item will go into cloud, which means which all go, which all needed a re-platform. I mean, which all go in the sense just lift and shift, which all needed a new platform, which all needed a new architecture, refactor, which all need to be into on-prem, you should not move it to the cloud, and eventually you create a modern application and you retire. So rehost, replatform, refactor, lift and shift, retain, retire, all those 6 are you remember. So the discovery tool that we have, AWS have their own AWS migration hub. I'll show you how it works, what is there. Apart from that, AWS also launched one thing called Cloud Adoption Readiness Tool, CART. Similar tool we have into Azure called Cloud Adaptation Framework, GCP also the same framework they have. Apart from that, if you want, no, I don't want it to utilize any of this tool, though it comes mostly into the free of cost, you need somebody independent view, and you have a NetApp Cloud Assessment or VMC discovery tool as well. However, the market leading AWS Migration Hub is pretty much robust, and I think much better than any of the independent service provider they have. Once you're done with your assessment, which means once you know which all application moving to cloud, what would be their architecture, what would be their structure, then the next step comes actual migration. Understand this thing very clearly. The actual migration actually having 3 stages. One, data migration. You are just moving the data, raw data. Second, your database migration, which can be like to like, which means you have in your on premises Oracle database, you wanted to move the Oracle into cloud, so it is homogeneous migration. You have PostgreSQL, you wanted to move it to Oracle, that is heterogeneous SQLs. So it could be like to like, it could be new or different database. And then the server migration. So if I really consider the migration process, it is data migration, server migration, and database migration. We have different tools for all those things. Before that, I wanted to give you a detailed understanding on the data migration. People have different kind of a concept. Some of them, when they think for a cloud migration, they start thinking with the application. However, it's not incorrect. However, from my point of view, we should start thinking from the infra, not from the top to bottom, rather bottom to top. The reason is that the design, the cost, uh, the entire setup would be much more easier if we go bottom to top. However, you need to identify the application, that which all application should go into my migration plan. For that, you can just look into the top view. Let's look into the data migration. What all kind of a data that you wanted to migrate into cloud? Understand that you want synchronously or asynchronously data to be moved to cloud. Uh, you have a database into your, or you have a data store into your on premises. All the website and everything is hosted into that on premises. You want the data to be backed up into the cloud. However, the endpoint the users are accessing from the on premises data source remain as it is. Means people should not understand that their data is moving to the cloud. So that kind of a synchronously or asynchronously data transfer from your on premises to cloud happens through the service called storage gateway. So which we call into AWS storage gateway. The similar service Azure is having called Azure Storage Explorer, and Google Cloud is having called Storage Transfer Service. The same service into Azure and GCP is not that robust as we call it into the AWS. However, we have independent service also NetApp Cloud Sync, which also provides seamless integration between your on-premises to cloud. The reason Azure and GCP is not that robust into this kind of a service, their migration process is a bit different than AWS, at least in this aspect. Second point of data transfer should be your in-stream data, your IoT, your match related data. You are hosting a cricket score website, maybe a portal where people are able to see the IPL matches, right? So those kind of a feed you wanted to slowly feed into the your cloud. So that kind of a IoT sensors data, your social feed, you can do it through Kinesis Firehose into Amazon. There are three different types of Kinesis Firehose, but let's not discuss that. But understand the service. Anything on the streaming, you do it to the Kinesis Firehose into AWS. The same thing you do in Azure called Azure Event Hub and Azure Stream Analytics, and Google have the similar service data flow. Though in Google and Azure you need few additional services to manage that, but understand this is the service you need. So first thing we cover, synchronously or asynchronously data being replicated from on-prem to cloud. On-prem to cloud, it is through storage gateway and other two services as I mentioned. Second thing is that in stream or streaming data also we have a service. Third most important thing is called petabyte scale data transfer, which means you have 6 petabyte of your backup, you wanted to move it to cloud. Definitely moving it to moving using your internet bandwidth is not a good option. However, you can do if you have time and money both. And the optimized solution is transfer it through a physical device. AWS, Azure, or Google will send you a physical box. You transfer your data like you transfer to your pen drive, to your USB drive or hard drive, external hard drive, and then ship it back to your service provider, AWS or Azure or Google Cloud. They transfer the data into the storage you define, S3 or any other bucket or any place that you want. And it would be faster than if you do it over the internet. Understand this fact. Many of the database migration process converts the table structure, database structure, the schema, and the transfer the data through Snowball or through this method that we discussed just now. This petabyte scale data, huge amount of data that we are being transferred in AWS called AWS Snowball, Azure Databox, and Transfer Appliance, Google Transfer Appliance. They all have similar kind of a service. Understand this fact. This data could be your storage data, this data could be your database data, this data could be your application data as well. Depending upon the migration you're doing, data migration holds the 70% of the chunk. So understanding which kind of a service you are needed for database migration, that is very important. Last point on the data migration is that you don't believe that I need a physical data appliance like a snowball to transfer data. I have a secure set of data. I want a dedicated high bandwidth network to be connected. AWS have the similar network called Direct Connect, which AWS provides a direct network to your on-premises to your service provider cloud network, and you can transfer it in the high bandwidth. Definitely, it costs you more, but again, if your data is costlier than anything else, then you should go for this option. Similar service into Azure called Azure Express Route and Interconnect for Google Connect, Google Cloud Platform. Now, coming back to the database migration. So database migration, homogeneous, like to like database, heterogeneous, different database migration, both is possible. AWS is pretty much done through AWS database migration services. Azure also the similar thing, database migration services. GCP, they have cloud data transfer or cloud data migration service or API. However, that is mostly for the homogeneous transfer, like to like. For different or heterogeneous database migration, Google prefers their partners, which is Migvisor or Stream or any other partners. Mostly they go by this too, and they promote into their migration process or case studies as well, that you, if you are doing complex data migration, heterogeneous data migration, you should go for Migvisor for assessment and Stream for actual migration planning and execution. It is very fast, uh, almost minimum downtime to your database, and it would be done. There are a lot of case studies, a lot of videos on the Stream as well, how it happens. You can check that. Server migration, AWS has their own proprietary tool called Server Migration Service. Azure Site Recovery and GCP is also having called Migrate for Compute Engine or Anthos. However, AWS promote their cloud endure migration or ATA data, which is one of them is agent based and second is the agentless. So these are the different types of migration that we have. Quick recap. First, we do assessment. Each of the cloud service provider have their own assessment or discovery tool. Preferred, we should use that only, not any independent market leading tool. Data migration, which is synchronously or asynchronously on-prem to cloud data backup, which they have different services. Any kind of a streaming data migration, we have different services. Petabyte scale data, we wanted to transfer it cost effectively. It is a hard disk kind of a box, huge large box, looks like a CPU, and it will be shipped to you. You transfer data, ship it back to your service provider, and they'll transfer the data to the storage that you created during this entire workflow. And the last one is called the dedicated transfer. Now, data migration can be for your static data or any object that you wanted to move. Again, it can be your database migration. Suppose you are migrating, I'm repeating the same thing, but you understand this aspect. You're migrating your database from your on-premises PostgreSQL to cloud Oracle database. Now, you just converted the schema using the database migration service they have, and you transfer the data using Snowball. Pretty much possible and doable. We are doing it in many of the cases. So understand this thing, your data migration can be into your database data migration, application data migration, or your any of the data migration, backup data migration as well. Going to the next on the database migration steps. As I mentioned, the first step is to the conversion of the schema. The schema being converted by the database management service, and then the actual database migration happen. Your DMS, database migration service, into your Azure, AWS, or GCP takes care of this all four item. Schema converses, data migration, table structure, primary key. However, creation of the foreign key function and index store procedure doesn't being taken care. I'll go to VM migration steps. So understand this thing, full stack migration. So when you do a VM migration, VM means your compute unit. What it holds application, where application reside on top of your operating system, what application access data. So when you do that VM migration, it includes data, operating system, and the application. Then it called full stack migration. And the strategy normally for this full stack migration would be, first you define your backup or archive process, when the backup would happen, at what frequency, what is my RPO and RTO. Then the DR setup that you define, that what would be my DR policies, right? And then you define your dev test environment setup, how many dev environment, which all QA environment that you wanted to set up. And then you create your hybrid operation, right, which means your on premises to your cloud structure, how it is being happen, or which all application would you retain into on premises and to cloud. And then actually the migration, I call it lift and shift for any kind of a migration. The reason, if I have changed my platform previous steps, if I have adopted new kind of a database, new kind of a version of a compute, then it is already been taken care in one of my four steps. So at the end, even though it's a re-platform, it becomes a lift and shift because I'm just changing the changing the source from on-premises to my cloud structure. Hope it makes uh, comfortable and it's not making complex. Migrate from VM to the cloud. I just wanted to give you a small example that how I can migrate one or few VM using export import method. I don't want it to use any tool. I don't want it to use any third party software or any professional services. So what are the basic steps? First, in your VMware workstation, what is your on premises VMware? You can export the image as to VMDK format, which is .ovf or .ova format. You install AWS command line interface from the Google, download it into your on-premises. You create one role or you create one user ID, user name with the programmatic access into AWS. With that programmatic access, you can configure your AWS account into your on-premises, which means from your on-premises, you can access actually that cloud because you have that user being created into the cloud. You create a role with administrative access and you upload that VMDK image into cloud storage, which is S3 bucket. From that image, you actually create one AMI, Amazon Machine Image, and from that AMI, you can create a VM. The way we are launching VM, uh, when we are creating any instance into AWS, the same way from that image, we can create a VM. So that is what, friends, I'll just quickly go into AWS console and we'll see how all those things works, right? AWS Migration Hub. If I go into that, I would be able to see the discovery tool. So we have this discovery tool which import the data. How we can import, we have some template, we can fill it out and we can import it. Second thing is that we can download this connector and it will connect to the VMware vCenter and it will take all the data. Or else always the polling based information which you install the data on each of your VM and they will find out the information, which I feel most convenient and most easier option. You have 10 VMs, you download that agent, configure that into each of this physical server or VM and let them collect the data. Based upon that data collection or the data collector, it will give you a result. It will show you that into your dashboard that okay, this is the assessment, and then your step for the migrate. So we discuss again, your migration means what? Your migration means data migration, database migration and the VM migration, right? So before that we go into database migration and other stuffs, let's look into that. Let's look into the few like it is called the server migration. Using that you can do your VM migrate into cloud. Again, you can see that cloud endure and ATA data. These are the two services I mentioned, right? One is agent based and one is agentless. You can always use this. And I am sure if you are doing large scale cloud migration, you are going to use any of this thing, where Cloud Endure, AWS already own it, and they call it AWS company for that. However, when we go for a data migration, Snowball, right? Okay, I'll see it here. Storage gateway, right? So storage gateway is one of those by which you are basically synchronously or asynchronously transferring your data from your on-prem to your cloud. So this is one of those facility of transferring your data. So file, volume, or tape. There's three types of data you can transfer. You can have your host platform, you can create your endpoint, and you can activate and you can start doing it. So if I'm doing file gateway, I can download this image, and or I can create this Linux VM image based upon my on-prem platform, and then I can transfer it. So that is one of those service that we use for it. And then Snowball is calling AWS Snow family. I was trying to searching Snowball, which is change, which we do not see now. We create a job, and you select which what is your destination country, United States, and you can type what type you wanted to import into Amazon S3. Definitely I'm going to send my data into Amazon S3. And then we go next. I'll fill out all this new address, shipping address, where they'll send the physical box, and then few next step they'll create a job to workflow which shows the device has been shipped to you. You upload the data, then you send it back. You can check all those things, and that's it. So this is one of the way that you can do your uh, data transfer, large scale data transfer. We'll quickly look into server migration. We discussed that database migration service, that will quickly look into it. And it is same thing. You create a replicate instance from DMS. DMS is pretty a robust tool and pretty robust software for database migration. You don't need any other thing if you're using AWS. Schema conversions tool mostly used for the heterogeneous database migration, where they convert the schema and then they transfer the data, where it will take care of all your data transfer. But if you wanted to only do schema conversion and then you transfer the data using Snowball, that is also doable. And you can do it. You can save some money on that, but DMS is pretty robust. You can create replicate instance, you can create your instance details, you give all the ARN and your region name, instance size, and then you connect with your database. It will be replicated accordingly. So that is all, guys, and let's look into this ATA data, which is used for the server migration. Cloud Endure. You have a good robust video here. If I play it, you would be able to see it,
Back on the
how
machines page.
easily it could be transferred or configured. Most of the professional services, they are using this kind of a product for better stability. Coming back to Migvisor and Stream. Understand this thing that Migvisor is an assessment. They call it next gen product for database migration. Basically, it is being used. Initially, it is being used by or used for the assessment tool. However, they are now pretty much good for the heterogeneous migration as well. It was a Naya Tech company which is now part of EPAM. EPAM is also coming up very globally very high uh, as part of cloud migration into digital space. And Stream is a partner of Google. They call it. They are with Google. Google also promote them. Stream also join all the seminars side by side with Google. They are continuous. They are real time. Even though you are moving a large scale data migration, it happens, and you will not even get a less than 1 minute of downtime even. I mean, less than 1 minute is a big number. It would be less than seconds. Few seconds would be downtime. So they show it live platform. You can get a demo also. So that is it, guys. If you wanted to do cloud migration, definitely there are a lot of hands-on things that we need to showcase, but understand this thing, migration has three parts. One, definitely your data migration, four types of data migration, your database migration, heterogeneous or homogeneous, and then your server migration. Thank you, friends. Hopefully, it is helpful for all of you. If I happen to do any migration by my own, I would try to capture if it is doesn't have any sensitive data. Till then, thank you. Stay tuned by my Google Cloud series would be reactivated from next week. I'm going to upload few more videos continuously. Thank you. That. Bye. Please like, subscribe, share. Thanks for watching.